And welcome back. And here we are, another week, another recap, another outstanding weekend where we witnessed some really great track and field performances, some phenomenal times. And the theme continues another national record gone down. This is just one of the more fantastic, fun parts of covering college track and field is constantly seeing these records fall and these amazing performances and the next stars being created. And, this weekend we witnessed a lot of strong performances. Obviously, the Razorback Invitational was really big for the sprinters. But up in Boston, we saw some great performances from many really talented distance runners. So let's just recap what was a phenomenal weekend. I'm going to start first things off. The first leg this week will be distance, and I feel that it should be distance this week because normally I always start with sprints, and I wanted to give the distance a shine, especially since that is where the national record came from. And we'll start with a young man who was featured last week on this channel, and that was Nico Young out of Northern Arizona. Another week, more Nico. And this has happened before. He's been mentioned on this podcast or this YouTube channel multiple times during the regular season before. He is a really big time talent, and I think this might be his year where he takes home a national title. I mean, breaking the all time 5,000 meter run record indoors, 12:57:14. Only person to defeat him in that race, that 5K race, was a professional. And he is by far away the top 5K runner. He's the only person under 13 minutes right now. And that he may be the only one at the end of the season still. We're looking at a very talented young man really kind of coming to his own. He's always near the top, but hasn't been the top guy. And maybe this is his turn. And for him to finally get an NCAA record to add to his impressive career, this is really sort of a feather in his cap. And all he needs now is a trophy. And he was mentioned here as a potential candidate to win the NCAA title in either the 5K or the 3K. And so far, we're not looking like we're idiots. He leads the nation right now, not only the 5K, but also the mile. So what an all-around talent he's turning out to be, and he was the lone men's distance highlight. No other number one times, but we're in end of January. February is coming. We're heading to the midway point of the regular season. I'm pretty sure once we get around championship season, or even next week, the first week of February, we're going to start seeing some of those distance times fall. On the women's side, we did, however, have quite a few outstanding performances. We'll start off with Carly Thomas of Washington. She kind of is in sort of the shadow of the really talented middle distance runners from Stanford and Juliet Whitaker and Royce and Willis. But she became the top runner in the 800 of the nation this past weekend, running 2 minutes, 95 seconds, just a big time. A sub 201 performance indoors is always going to stand out. And kudos to her and doing it, at a pretty tough invite, the University of Washington invite slash Miles City. Obviously, on her home track, still doesn't matter. It's just that is a great time indoors against a pretty strong caliber field. And we should look to hear her name a little more. She's been mentioned here so far twice this season. So I think we're going to start getting accustomed to seeing this talented young lady. And that's not to negate the talent that is at Stanford and Juliet Whitaker and Royce and Willis. But let's give Carly a little look. Carly Thomas, 2 minutes 95. You cannot ignore that. That's a great time. And then we're going to move to the mile. Kimberly May of Providence. Providence, another one of those really strong Northeast powers. Here they are with a new star in the mile. I mean, a sub 430 mile, 427.85. An outstanding time. I believe a 10-second PR. That is just great. And Providence is, not any school that we're shocked that's producing talented distance runners. They've been doing it for quite a long time, and she's just the latest. But this was a big stand-up performance. She is the only sub 430 runner. I had expected for us to get a sub 430 runner, but probably later in the season. This is January, and a 427.85. She wasn't messing around. She really went for it, and she's going to probably be there later on in the season. With so many of our athletes right now in the distance events, specifically turning pro a little early, this event particularly is kind of left open. However, we can't ignore the talent that is Juliet Whitaker. We can't ignore the talent that is Carly Thomas. But Kimberly May is the one who is sub 430. And she's really out east, kind of not against going against any of those really strong Western powers, but East Coast has really stepped up. She has a teammate that also almost broke 430. So she's training with a really good training partner, a really good program, and she's in a very competitive environment. We may actually see her drop that time later this season. And then the final sort of distance note I want to talk about is the Oregon women's DMR. And it's early to talk about relays, but you cannot ignore that, what they did. A sub 1050 in the DMR in January just blows my mind. 1047.50. They were under 1050 in January. That is just remarkable. Early on, we're seeing three teams already under 11 minutes, but one team under two, excuse me, two teams under 1050, and Oregon is really starting to ramp up their distance performances right about now. So for the next couple of weeks, we should start hearing Oregon athletes kind of pop up here and there with regularity. We know they're out west. We know that West Coast doesn't always run a whole lot, but Oregon is one of those programs that does run a lot indoors, and they have a lot of championship trophies to prove that. This is probably where they kick things into high gear. They're moving into the Big Ten next season. It's going to be quite interesting to see Oregon go up against the traditional Big Ten powers of Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, Penn State, a really strong distance program. I mean, adding Oregon and Washington to the mix, my goodness, what a great conference that's going to be, even more so next year. Now, shifting gears to our second leg, coming down the backstretch, of course, we have our sprinters. And we saw a talented young lady come out of high school, out of Hydale. Her name is Brianna Liston, and she committed to LSU. And her freshman year last year was a little up and down. And it's okay. But this year, it's very clear that she is not about playing games. It's an Olympic year, and she, I think, intends to be competing for Jamaica there. Her debut in the 60-meter dash, I'm going to let you here watch, and I'm going to pause, stop here, so that way you can just sort of take in the incredible performance you just witnessed.
Set. And a good one there in lane 4. Brianna Liston of LSU. Oh my. Liston.
So now that you've seen that incredible performance and you've recognized that her time was 7.07 as her seasonal debut, you will recognize how great of a performance that is. That is Julian Alfred-esque. And pretty soon we may be starting to say that is Brianna Liston-esque. 707 is no slouch. She's already in the top 10 all time of individual performances in her sophomore season, in her debut. In an event that we thought wasn't going to be her strongest. She was a phenomenal 200-meter runner. But at LSU, they teaching and how to develop speed is something that they do. And she clearly is the next in line. Clearly, 707? I mean, prior to this week, we were wondering who's going to be that big breakout LSU sprinter. I admit she wasn't even included in my preview for winning a title in the 60 or 200. That has to change. When you run a 707, you have pretty much reorganized everyone's predictions. Sub 7-1 in your debut as a sophomore. My goodness. And Jamaica just keeps turning them out, and she clearly will be next. But Team USA doesn't have to look too far. In the same conference, you have Jamesha Ford of South Carolina, primarily a quarter miler, who really proved that quarter milers are the dons of the track. Her 200 time, 22:58. Whew. When you talk about someone blazing, a freshman, keep an eye out on this name. We're going to be hearing a lot from her, I feel. And, South Carolina under Coach Curtis Fry all those years ago um, in past had great success with developing 200 and 400-meter runners. I mean, a lot. And they always had a competitive 4x4. And things have not changed under the new coach. And clearly, 22.58 this early as a freshman, they aren't going to go anywhere. They may just simply go to another level. And we would have been talking about this young lady in the 200 had it not been for Jamesia Forge, and that's Amber Anning of Arkansas by way of Great Britain. I mean, she had an incredible weekend, and this really helps her rebound the disappointment that last season was. She started off with so much promise. She was one of the top quarter milers on that really deep Arkansas roster. And, some things didn't go well, an injury, and it just looked like things kind of fall off the rails a little bit for her last season. And she's kind of gotten things back together. I mean, a 22.6 in the 200, but it's her 400 time that helps her stand out. She's now number one in the nation with a 50.56. She has almost a second lead on the entire field already in the end of January. And with that 22.6 time, she can lower that to a low 50. And if you're running 22.6, can't you run 49.2 or maybe, 50.2? Somewhere in that range, she's going to really drop that time. She may be this year's top 400 runner and proof that you're going to need probably sub 50 indoors, my God, to win the NCAA title on the women's 400. She has just put her name in the cup. And now we're moving to the men. You look at Robert Gregory of Florida. He's been mentioned here already, and he's our preseason favorite to win the indoor title. And although he's not number one in all of college, because the top time is a JUCO here, but here he is in Division One, the top performer again. 20.40. Florida just keeps cranking out champions. Here's another one. We're going to hear his name again. He is the defending outdoor champion in the SEC in the 200. And again, my preseason favorite to win the 200 in the national championship, and I think he's well on his way. But let's keep an eye on the 400 guy at USC, William Jones. And they have a lot of talent there at USC. I mean, we're still waiting to see what Justin Bryan will do, but William Jones, kind of right now is that guy. 45.24. Whew. I mean, to be that close to sub 45 at the end of January and you're a West Coaster, I think we may want to start paying attention to this young man a little more. There's a great chance that he's going to be the guy to go under 45 indoors. And that's just insane again. It's become a regularity that you must go sub 45 to win it. He probably is that guy. And with all the talent that's still coming back, I mean, again, he has a teammate, Justin Bryan, and a bunch of other teammates that are super talented. 45.24, and the way he ran this past weekend at the Razorback Invitational, he ran with such command. He was not afraid. He got out very well and just seemed to just keep his poise. And he was in a very tough heat, and that propelled him to such a great time. And in the 4x4, Arkansas women, another year, and it's just the way the times now for this event stand out to me. It blows my mind. Not only do you have to run sub 330 on the women's side, but you really kind of have to run sub 328 to be competitive. Let's just be very honest, because Arkansas dropped a 325.5 in January. And with all that talent they have, we know that time is going to get lowered. That's what just makes that crazy. 325.59. Not so long ago, and we're talking maybe a couple years, that would have been good enough to win an outdoor title, let alone run that time in January. I mean, this group probably is running at 323 at their peak at the end of the season, possibly. But we're going to see that time come down. And we can't ignore what South Carolina did, 327.09. And then Georgia, 328. What? What's going on there? And seeing Georgia have the better 4x4 than Florida, which still put up a pretty good time, 332, but LSU, 331, USC women, 328. I mean, we're looking at six teams that are already sub 3 or at 332 or lower. This will be a pretty strong 4x4 come postseason. Just look for probably the entire field to run sub 330 indoors. That's the new standard. And it blows my mind. On the men's side, we're looking at Florida again. The men 4x4, 304.08 this early, and we're still waiting to see what Genoa McIver will do because they ran that without him. You heard me correct. They ran 304.08 without McIver, who's a sub 45-second quarter miler. That's the type of depth. And without their really young, talented core included either, some with injuries, some that didn't compete, Florida's going to be pretty solid in this event continuously. And we should expect it as long as Coach Holloway is there, they're going to always be competitive in this event. But 304.08 this early is pretty solid. I think they're going to threaten a 302. This was a pretty good race at the Razorback Invitational because for a minute it looked like Florida was going to lose because there was such a strong third leg from Arkansas and they're on their home track. But that outstanding anchor, Javon Powell, just powered his way through and surpassed Arkansas 304.08 to 304.27. And yes, Arkansas again another year. They just keep plugging away at having a great 400-meter runners and a great relay. We can't ignore Texas Tech that has already ran 305 this year, or Arizona State that's ran 305 as well. This should be interesting, but I think this year it'll be between Florida and Arkansas. Pretty solid. Now, transitioning to our third leg, we'll look at the field events. And this was a pretty heavy weekend for field events. There were a total of six new number one performances, and we'll start in the pole vault on the women's side. Hannah Mall, one of the Mall twins at Washington, became our first 15-foot jumper, and she's a freshman. So we're going to be hearing her name a lot. 15 feet, 2 and 3 1/4 inches, or 4.64 meters to win the pole vault at home. And again, we're going to be hearing that name. Her or her sister, what a talented young lady. 15 feet already, and it's a freshman. I, the sky's the limit for her, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we will get out of her. I said last week we're still waiting for that 15-foot jumper, and we have it already, but didn't expect to see it come from a freshman. We'll continue out west with the jumps, and we'll look at the triple jump. Timmy Tope Ojora of USC, 45 feet, 2 1/4 inches, or 13.77 meters. It seems that USC has found their footing with their jumps program. For a minute, they were transitioning many different jump coaches, and this clearly seems to be the fit. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen a USC triple jumper be the number one. And back in the 90s and the early 2000s, when I was a high school student, that's one of the things that they were phenomenal at. USC and LSU and Georgia Tech were known for producing really good triple jumpers. And here they are back with another talented jumper, Timmy Topo Jura. Let's continue to hear from her because that's an event that's not technically wide open, but I think she's kind of put her name in the hat with that mark. When you become number one and you're already over 45 feet in January, you are making a statement. And continuing with our West theme, we look at Jada Ross of Oregon. 61 feet 9 and 3 1/4 inches, or 18.84 meters in the shot put. That's correct. Oregon has really kind of put their feet in the ground when it comes to adding a quality amount of great throwers, and Jada Ross is their next talent. What a strong throw this early, 61 feet. More to come from her, I'm sure, and what event sure it will capture new attention. And we're looking for a new star in the shot put, and maybe it's her. We'll see. And then Allie Jones of USC, continuing with being out west for the field events. A new pentathlon lead, 4,528 points. Jones was literally near the top or at the top of every single event this weekend. And she did that against Pippi Lotta Enoch of Oklahoma, which is what caught my attention the most because I did predict Enoch to be the winner. And Enoch had a great performance, 4,281 points. But Allie Jones, outscored her by almost 300. And just break out her performance. She won the hurdles, 8.20, which is a top time in the hurdles, let alone in the heptathlete in a competition. But, a strong performance there. And then you come on down to the high jump. She had a great performance in the high jump, even though that was, I would say, probably her weakest event. But she still did pretty serviceable. She finished eighth overall, 5 feet, 6.5 inches. Not poor, but, not super, but enough to keep her in the game. Then she comes back and wins the shot put, 43 feet, 3 inches, garners 739 points in just that event alone. And then she comes back in the long jump and finishes third, 20 feet, 5 3/4 inches, a very strong jump. That's a top 15 jump, nationally, just in the long jump. Finishing third there, Pippi Lotta Enoch, that was her top event, the long jump. And then when we come to the 800 meters, here she's winning again a 2:11 in the 800, almost scoring 1,000 points in just the 800. She took three of the five events. In one event, she was third. So there probably will be more focus on improving her high jump. I'm sure her coaches will look into that. But really solid performance, for the debut of her seasonal debut, excuse me. Allie Jones, I'm sure we'll be hearing more from her. On the men's side, Romain Beckford, we heard of him before. He was in our preview. Transferred from South Florida, now at Arkansas with a lot of his other Jamaican teammates, and is kind of cementing himself as the top high jumper. And he's cemented it by himself this past weekend. 7 feet 5 1/4 inches or 2.27 meters. Strong performance on his home track, and it's possible that we may see him lower that, or excuse me, improve upon that mark. 7.6. I think he can get to 7.7, potentially maybe outdoors, but I think that's coming. I think that's in his future. 7.5 this early is a pretty solid mark, and the reason why he was the preseason favorite. And then our final guy we're going to highlight today, and final person, is Aiden Ouimet of Illinois. No surprise, Petros has another talented multi-event athlete. His score is converted 6,010 points because Illinois' track is a 200-meter flat track. But for him to have the performances that he did, don't know if he is the guy, but for him to score 6,000 points now, that's an event I still want to say is potentially wide open, especially with some athletes having turned pro, some not having shown any, competed at all this year yet. I look at that event as potentially wide open, and why not him? To have 6,000 points in January is a pretty solid mark. And then our final leg, I want to talk about the team title race and the rankings. I had shared with you a couple of weeks that I really kind of want to wait to February, and I still do. But there are some things that have kind of come into focus. Um, I do see why both the USTFCCCA and Flow Track think that Arkansas women probably have a great shot at winning along with Florida women. Florida is really solid in a lot of events. They don't have the depth in the sprints that they've had in the past on the women's side. I think that's going to probably change this coming offseason. I'm pretty sure they're going to ramp up recruiting. We're still waiting to see what Ramia Elliott and Kayla Davis would do, but they ran admirably in that 4x4. So still expecting to see, their times kind of drop, and we'll see more the next time Florida is out at the Tyson Invitational in a couple of weeks. But they have a really strong long jumper in Claire Bryant. We can't ignore Claire Bryant has jumped over 6 feet in the high jump as well. And Thea Charlton, close to 21 feet in the long jump. Curious to see what she does in the 100 meters. She's changed coaches. She's now under obviously Mike Holloway, but she left really great program. Tim Ross really good at developing really good strong short sprinters, and curious to see how she develops in that area. She can be a really solid piece to add for their team title hopes, but you can't ignore the strong depth that they have in the distance events, regardless of whether it's the 800, the mile, the 3K, the 5. I mean, you have Parker Valby and a really great group of talented young ladies. They have a great group of throwers. They haven't even shown their full hand yet, and they already have some great performances on the books already. But Arkansas, to me, just really seems to already kind of have a lot of things in place. They have, great 400-meter runners, great short sprinters. I mean, Shanti Jackson clearly seems to be the next big talent in Arkansas, already running sub 23 in her debut. Man, if she's on that record-breaking 4x4, I think they're going to probably break the indoor record. Just a really strong, talented group. You can't ignore their distance runners, and you can't ignore their field athletes either, specifically in the jumps. So keep an eye out on those two teams. On the men's side, I am really wrestling with seeing anyone really try to break Texas Tech. I mean, the depth that they have. And they didn't have a particularly great weekend on their sprinters. Some of them just really, they've competed a little too much and they probably need a break, and they may have that coming up. But I just think they have so much depth. They have a strong relay. They have great field performers. They're got a really strong distance group, probably the strongest they've had in a while. I really think it's going to be kind of hard to wrestle the title from Texas Tech. I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm a fan of Florida, fan of Michigan, fan of USC, and of course my alma mater, Eastern Michigan. But I will give Texas Tech their just due. That is a very solid program and a very strong team. And they have shown up at the indoor championships ready before and have walked away with a title. So we can't ignore that. And, kudos to Coach Kitley. This is a strong team again. But in closing, I think we had a really solid weekend. No surprise, we had several great meets. Obviously, the Razorback Invitational was one, but up in Boston at I believe it's at Boston University, another solid meet there. That track just really seems to attract a lot of great distance talent. But there's more to come. We're looking at the first week of February. That has been historically one of the strongest weekends in the indoor season. And I expect for that to continue. I'm looking forward to seeing what type of marks we get next week. And I'm looking to see if we can get another woman under 8 seconds in the 60 hurdles, because right now it looks like it's a race between Grace Stark and Aaliyah Armstrong. Ironically, that was predicted here, but more athletes will probably dip under 8, and we're looking at a great hurdle season, I think, for both the women and the men. But as always, thank you so much. I ask that you will like and subscribe and provide any feedback, whether positive or negative. I want to improve the channel and I receive it with love. And I hope this helps to further expand the sport and that we continue to help it grow. Thanks again. You all have an outstanding day, outstanding week, and I look forward to talking with you next week.